Welcome to Women's Perspectives, the podcast by Cartier that celebrates women's empowerment. Historically, we've seen the way in which our global communities, our marginalized communities, have often been treated as minor characters that have one dimension to them rather than whole complex beings. And over the past few years, while Hollywood most definitely faces some challenges, we've seen the power of embracing all of our intersections. While we've talked about the identity and role of women in media, this sentiment couldn't be truer for the intersections of being Black and queer and the power of authentic portrayals and authentic projects. Today, I am so excited because I get to be in conversation with two-time Tony-nominated actor Jeremy Pope about his journey from Broadway to Hollywood, his intentional choice of choosing to portray complex characters, knowing your worth, and carving out your own space in this industry. Thank you so much for joining us.
Nice to see you, man.
I know, so good to see you. For me, first and foremost, I have lots of questions, but I also want to talk about whatever you want to talk about. But so much of, I think, the conversations that we've been having in the podcast is first understanding how people approach their careers and their art, especially coming from different marginalized communities. I think a theme that so many of us have experienced is the idea of being told we're not allowed to take up as much space. And when you enter the arts, it is, quite honestly, one of the largest rejections of that sentiment.
Right.
But it takes a lot of courage. It takes moving through so many spaces that haven't made space for us, aren't expecting to see us. And so, you know, for you, you not only have come in to the entertainment industry through the craziest, hardest interdisciplinary art of Broadway.
Yes.
I truly
amen.
do not know how you all do that. I sit in admiration of the skill set. You've so intentionally brought incredible stories to life, centering real people, centering what it is to be Black and queer, centering what it is to be joyful, like all of the experiences. And so that is my most long-winded way of asking, what made you interested in the arts to begin with? When did you realize this was a space that was meant for you?
Yeah. I mean, first and foremost, I feel so very grateful to have the opportunities that I've been able to have. And I don't take any of it lightly because there are so many talented people. And like you said, this business, being an artist, can sometimes be very difficult because it is and does feel like a lot of rejection. And sometimes that's heavy, that weighs heavy on sensitive spirits and creative beings.
Especially when the task is to show up as your full, most vulnerable self.
Give us everything you have, but then we might tell you no. And you're like, but that was all I had. And I think you realize sometimes that isn't all you have. You have more, and you do a lot of digging and soul searching. So for me, like, being an artist is so nuanced. And I think being in different mediums and spaces like theater, like TV, like film, you learn so much about yourself. So it's kind of like a double win. It's like a win that the things I'm a part of are received well by the audience, but it's like I'm learning so much about who I want to be in this world. And I feel like you probably can relate because we're growing, we're evolving in front of an audience, you know what I mean? And we have our parents and people that are there to protect us and guide us, but there's also things that we have to figure out and learn on our own, you know? But I think like having theater, I kind of coined it as like, it was military of acting. It taught me discipline.
That is the most perfect way to put it. I always say theater actors need to come teach TV actors how to work. And I'm saying this as a TV actor.
No, I feel you. I think it's one of those things. And I think in whatever profession you are a part of, discipline is usually at the core of like self-generating. So I think that being my intro to one, having a job, but two, being an artist and having to find it when you didn't think you had it. And also the idea of sometimes being in a black box theater where you don't have cut and you don't, it's beginning, middle, and end every night. And that taught me just how to show up and how to have my grounding and to not allow noise affect my intention and the soul work that I was doing to bring these characters to life. So it becomes bigger than just the project that I'm working on, but it does become a soul journey. That's the thing that I think gives me the courage to continue going through what feels like sometimes relentless rejection or trying to, you know, dismiss any energy that has nothing to do with me and my purpose. Because there's a lot of things that are out there that just aren't for you. and have nothing to do for you, you know, but get in the way of the peace and the love and the joy. That's the thing. I don't want to be a part of this business and not lead with love and joy. You know, like that doesn't feel correct. It's so freeing to be an artist. So if they're not allowing me to create, and I say they, meaning the people and the powers that be, I find my own ways to like create and feel like purposeful, you know?
Mm-hmm. No, and it's such a beautiful and poignant point to make, because I can also imagine there's this feeling that one, nominated for 2 Tonys within the same cycle, and suddenly you're letting a lot of voices in. And I can imagine it feels like a common sentiment among artists that when you push yourself up for public display in so many ways, that it's a part of your responsibility to remain open to the criticism, etc.
Yeah,
and
like
it's almost,
that's what you asked for. It's like,
yeah, there's this sentiment that it's what you asked for, and so you have to put yourself out there, versus thinking of creation as something that should be self-fulfilling at all times.
Right.
And I love what you said, is that sometimes you feel like you gave it your all and it doesn't mean that you did.
Right.
And so there's always growth within that, but it doesn't mean that you need to give up your space and your sanctity. But even more largely, when you're of any kind of marginalized group, it's a feeling that we feel always, to be ahead of the criticism. To take it so seriously, to be better than it, is a constant feeling.
Yeah. And I think to yes and amen that, it's like I kind of have had to balance this idea of like, am I doing enough? You know, because when you come from marginalized spaces, you feel like you're like they're representing. I'm on behalf of all of us. So you want to make the biggest impact, because you know that is essentially opening doors for so many others.
Talking about what you had said briefly on, at times, what can feel like the burden of representation, in terms of the burden of knowing the opportunities that could blossom from this.
Right.
And knowing that you're standing in as the first of, as the only of, and that so many of our stories are contingent on the success of the story that came before us. If you want to see a Black family on television, you need to hope that there was a Black family on television that paved the way.
Right.
And I had loved in some interviews when you were talking about the impact of knowing that you hadn't seen a Black gay movie star before, and that you were that in so many ways. And I'm just wondering, how do you process your role or responsibility in representation? We talked to Carrie Mae Weems briefly, and she had made a great point of saying when she was entering photography as a Black woman, there was no Black woman photographer to reference. Right. And how she was creating her own canon in this really interesting way. And so I'm curious, is responsibility the word you'd use? Or how do you make sense of this collision of opportunity and being the first in so many regards?
Well, what's interesting is, like, it wasn't until I was in the inspection, I'd already had the role, we were in shooting, that Elegant said to me, like, you are a Black gay movie star. And I was kind of like, I never really thought about it in that way. Like, you know, you're so early in your career, you're not like, I'm a star. You're not like coming in heavy on that energy, like real talk. At least I wasn't.
You were.
Yeah, I was. But to hear someone say that, and to like kind of speak that over my life, and when I like just sat there and thought about it, where I was like, oh, who are those Black queer men that I saw represented in Hollywood, in the space that I am in now? And I was like, oh, what was I following? And I was like, oh, I think I was Frankensteining my way to it. Like, you're piecing a piece of Whitney Houston mixed with Denzel, if we put them together, and then there's a hint of Brandy, and then like you just put all these, and they'll be funny like Eddie Murphy and Chris Tucker at the same time. Like, you just try to like morph this thing to follow, because there wasn't necessarily that clear open representation. However someone identifies and what they want to give personally, like, and I think going through just different times of life, that wasn't socially acceptable, or people didn't feel safe to say and to stand firmly in that. But not having that so clearly can make it tough and challenging. I grew up religious, and I remember always hearing like, faith is believing in the things you can't see. You're like, right. And that was easier for me to do when we're talking from like a spiritual thing, that you could like, it's around me, but I don't see it. But then you'd also hear people say like, seeing is believing. And you're like, but if I'm not seeing myself represented, how am I supposed to believe that I will be represented? So it was like, I do believe in two truths. So it was like, I'm trying to have faith, but let me see a little bit so that I can believe a little bit. You know what I mean? So I think like I've just continued to follow
what speaks to me, my heart. I don't want to be bored on someone else's journey. And I say that meaning like there are certain opportunities that you will get, that I will get, where if it doesn't speak to your heart and your soul as soon as you see that email title, you probably should pass. You probably should pass from an artist standpoint, because you're going to end up doing all these things and kind of you're not going to feel yourself the way that you probably could or should. And sometimes that means stepping away from big films. Sometimes that means stepping away from money, which are hard things to do. When you're coming from a marginalized place going like, but will there be another? I don't think either of us can confidently say, yeah, that check's going to come in another. Like sometimes it'd be like, I might have to think about it a little bit, but I've tried to stand firm on the things that are meant for me, and the things that are for me will be so tailored for me that it's not just a yes, like a hell yeah. It's like, I have to. And that's what The Inspection was. That's what Choirable was. That's what Ain't Too Proud was. Like all the projects I've been, they've always been like, I have to do this. And then you reflect and you look back and you're like, I think that's why they were received so well, is because I was so happy to be there. There was so much love. There was so much I wanted to give these characters. So that's entering the complex of being Basquiat on stage, wanting to honor this man's life and his legacy and his spirit. Not being like, oh, I'm in Hollywood here, not focused on what I had to, the work I needed to do every night. But then also understanding, here we have a huge opportunity with this queer forward movie, and you need to be seen. Because seeing is believing for someone else out there. So if they see me, they're going to go, because of Jeremy Pope, I know that I can be in that room. And I want people to yes and what I'm doing. So I think now that I'm aware of that, I try to just, I maybe it's just aware of it in conversations and in spaces, and knowing that, like, again, like when we are seen in these places or in things, I come before you on behalf of so many. I come before you from my ancestors and people that have paved the way that are no longer here, but I also come from the talent that we have yet to see, the stories we have yet to hear, the souls we have yet to like dig and excavate to find out more. If anything, that's the responsibility I feel, is like, don't be bored on someone else's journey.
I love that. I'm taking that. Don't be bored on someone else.
Don't be bored. Just don't do it. It's not worth it.
You made such a great point, is that sometimes there's incredible opportunities, there's incredible money that seems like a no-brainer, because you don't know, is that popping up again? Can I guarantee that something of, an equivalent size will be present in my life? But when you're talking about all these moments that have been, outside looking in, career-defining, but for you, soul-defining, it's really powerful to think that that's the power of following your desire and where you want to be.
Yes.
Versus where someone else thought you should be.
Right. In that moment. So there's been so many little moments, whether it's, I remember like when I had to, before I was Tony nominated twice, there was a moment where producers were making me choose. They were saying, you either have to be here or there. Because when you think about it, you're like, you can't be in two shows in the same season. They didn't see how that could happen. And that was one of those moments where I was like, what do I do here? Like, I want to be in both these shows. I invested so much time in both these things. And that's where my faith came in. And I think I have so much faith and believing that what we do as artists is bigger than us. And we're here just planting seeds for things that will grow beyond our time here. And I think that is the power of art. It's like, you never really know when people will discover your art. It's like music, you'll hear, I think about the music my mom played growing up in the house cleaning. It's like, at the time, it sounded aggravating because you knew we clean in the house. But now it's the music that like is so nostalgic. And I listen to Earth, Wind & Fire different, and Anita Baker and Luther Van, like all these old classics different. And I think about art and movies and books, things that arrive to you whenever they arrive to you, but how it can have an impact at the time that it arrives at you. So that's that faith of knowing like nothing we're doing is in vain, no matter how big or small as artists. And what we're creating is going to find the right person. And it's going to affirm them and wherever they are in their life, or give them a piece of joy or comfort, and they're going to continue to take their next step forward in whatever direction. And that's the thing where I'm like, oh, that is my purpose. Whether that's on screen, whether that's taking photos, like, and all the things that I do, let that be the thing that is my purpose. Because then you kind of get out of the way. It's like, let me stop trying to be in control and just follow intuition and desire and just yes to that,
It's a necessary reminder, I think, while nowhere nearly as emotionally taxing as doing two shows in a season. I think my version of that was filming grownish while I was in school and committing to being in school, but I just resonate with what you say in regards to how necessary that was, even at its most taxing. And luckily I had, a team and a village behind me helping me through every step of the way, but how I needed that for myself. And being in school made sense of my work life, and being at work made sense of my school life in a way where one wouldn't have been complete without the other.
Right.
But I did have to push through that initial feeling of reticence, luckily from no one immediately around me, but from people that are looking at schedules, from counselors, school counselors that are like,
it's not lining up.
Yeah,
the math ain't
come
mathing.
back when you're not busy. I said, well, that's just never going to happen.
Yeah. And let me just say, I think you've done such a beautiful, from the outside, I'm sure there have been moments, but from the outside, it's been beautiful to watch you and your purpose. It's inspired me to having seen you, I feel like we're both growing up at the same time, but having watched you evolve, watching you evolve into the more fully realized version of yourself. I think that's so dope to watch, and even to have this conversation, to go from seeing each other all around to being in this space and being able to connect on this way. And then it affirms those moments. I'm like, that's what those hellos and why the energy always felt good is because we knew we would arrive. We didn't know, but here we are, you know what I mean? So I just giving you some love.
Thank you. I received that. And I feel the same. I think everything that you're saying now is just palpable, and I sensed it in just how you move in terms of moving from a space of passion and seeing your work. It is evident in everything that you touch, just how present you are in it. And as an actor that is very much in process of figuring out what I want that to look like and what I want my art to look like, it's always reaffirming to watch somebody making art that I love. Oh, right, that's the potential, or that's what we're chasing. So thank you for that.
Yeah.
And I wanted to just go back to this Frankensteining of people to follow. And what I love is just how tapped in you are to the arts generally, and that you are so interdisciplinary. And so I'm wondering, as you both entered the arts, but even now in your life, who are those people, or who were those people that kind of stand tall as examples of maybe not necessarily what you're emulating, but what you're pulling from?
Yeah. I'm so inspired by so much. Without even realizing it. Yeah, I think for me, within the acting space, I grew up watching Martin with my dad, and the joy him and Gina had, and Tisha Campbell, and these people, Tashina Arnold, these people were in theater. They were like triple threats, if you know, whatever that means. It's they were capable of doing more than one thing. And aren't we all? You know what I mean? Aren't we all nuanced humans? So I think if anything, seeing The Wiz, these movies, the black version of Brandy, or of Cinderella with Brandy,
seeing The Wizard of Oz to this day is my...
Right, because The Wiz for you is for me, that was my thing. I was like, oh, it's based off of something else? For me, it was that version only. But I think about the Eddie Murphys, the Denzels, the Angela Bassetts, there's countless names, Whoopi, Queen Latifah.
Right. And even in the books and music, who are those people?
I go old school, I go new school. There's so many people, black, brown, that have inspired me to just try and to lean in and to be that artist that does multiple things. And if not for them, for yourself. I think for me, it started in the church, doing the church plays. And I feel like in church, they'd be like, can you sing? Okay, can you dance? Can you, they want to know, what can you do? Because you need to serve. You need to do something. So because of that, you start to ask yourself, well, can I sing? I'm okay at dancing. So now you're on the dance team, and then you're doing the choir, and then adult choir and youth choir. It's this arena where of service, of something bigger, you start to see what it is that you can do. And sometimes people will see those things in you before you do. They're like, I think you'd be a great speaker. So we're going to give you the big poem this time, or we're going to give you the big scripture. So now you're tasked to learn this thing. And I think it started there. And then it moved in high school, auditioning, having to choose between running track or doing the school musical, choosing the school musical. Just being comfortable with being uncomfortable, but trying new things in a space of people that are we're all figuring it out. And that was inspiring and encouraging. That's what excites me, the unconventional approach to being an artist, especially when we know as black artists, this business, these arenas weren't really set up for our success. It just wasn't built with that in mind. So because of that, do what you want to do. Play around, have fun at it. For me, that's my way in, is don't try. There really isn't a roadmap there are people who have done things before you, of course, and who have paved the way for you to even be in this conversation. But now that you're here, give them something else to see. Don't try to be what they're already comfortable with. And not saying you got to do things for gag effect, but if you have something that you want to share, talk about it, share it, let people know. For you, I feel like that was something, especially watching you evolve and be in the different spaces, educating people on what she likes to do outside of being on this show or playing this type of role. It's she's also interested in doing that, and you standing 10 toes down on that, being yeah, I want to speak about this. I want to step forward in this. And people going, here's the resource to do it.
Yeah, I love how you worded that, which is, this space wasn't made for us to go have fun, because I think so many times, and I've even had to struggle with recentering myself. It feels like the space isn't meant for us, so you have to prove them wrong, and it's so externally referred.
Right.
This idea of thinking, I'm thinking about how you're perceiving me constantly. I'm thinking of having to outdo your expectations of me constantly.
No, that's very right.
And it is important to see just how much you're even capable of, and those times in which I've recentered. And I realized when I moved from that space of, so just go have fun, I'm outperforming without even realizing it, versus those times when I said, oh, I'm going to show you what I can do.
So real, yeah. No, that's so real. And I think just being bold enough to allow your brain and your heart to think in an unconventional way. And when we say about, I love having fun, not in a rebellion, but just do what you're called to do.
Authenticity.
Yeah, enjoy it, share what you want to share, and expand people's mind of how they look at a woman, a Black woman, how they look at a Black queer man. Start to teach them, educate them on what else, the complexities of doing this and that. And I'm that's the thing that I think a lot of people are scared to do. It's sometimes scary to be vulnerable and to try the thing that people might not receive well, especially now in this age of having social media and having other opinions so quickly.
Instant feedback.
Instant. So I think about that. I think about what you allow to come in, and does that help inform, or does it get in the way? Does it interfere with what you imagine in your heart? But just to align on what matters, and what did you set out to do? What was your intention? What is your goal? Who are you speaking to? And oftentimes, like you said, you realize you already did that without even trying. It was already embedded in the process. So being aware of that, when you're creating and when you're stepping into these arenas that feel scary or don't feel like they're necessarily seeing us fully all the time. That can feel sometimes hard when we know that we're putting in so much of ourselves, and we're but are we seen? Don't say anything, but are you seeing me? And sometimes that question is left unanswered.
Absolutely.
You just you pray and you believe that you're being seen, and you find those moments where you walking down the street or whomever, or emails or DMs or whatever, where someone will affirm you in a way where you're the right people are seeing it and feeling it. The person is feeling it, and that person that you were, I think I'm speaking to someone, I think this is for someone, they receive it. That is the beautiful thing about art. Even Basquiat, playing someone who, I feel like his time on earth selfishly was lived short. But I think about the impact that his art and his existence has had on me, on being an unconventional Black artist under the scope of a white industry, predominantly white speaking industry. So what does that look like? And then also in the things that were hurtful and sad for him, how can I be better and not allow it to feel like a heaviness on my life? And looking at what maybe could he have done different, or not even done different, but what do I just need to be aware of, and how does that inform me? So.
Absolutely. It's how I feel about James Baldwin as somebody that has been such a guide from when I read the first short story of his at 13, but I wouldn't have expected just how much of his work that was made without me in mind in the world felt tailor-made for me
for you
once I received it.
Right, and I feel that's literally, he's another huge inspiration of just someone who his mind was so unconventional in a time that I know was hard and wasn't affirming, and who he was and what he represented and how he spoke about us and how we should move and how he was going to move. But like you said, it's just it's beautiful to know that, at least for me, I choose to look at the beauty of, like, even in the madness and the chaos of being unsure of where does this all lead, I do believe that the things that we're creating, the conversations that we're having, things that we're making, will find the people that there's, it's supposed to find, and gift them something. I can't guarantee what that will be, but it will gift them something. And, I hope that it sets them free, or it sets them in a place where they can continue to say yes to the things that, give them love and light.
Our time here has gone by way too quickly, but I couldn't think of a better way to leave our audience, to leave this conversation than with that note. And I'd have to say, personally, it's an affirming conversation to have, trying to figure out what will be personally affirming to then share with the rest of the world.
Absolutely.
So we'll see.
We'll see. Stay tuned.
I'm so grateful for your insight and what you shared just about your journey, but your larger observations on what we're supposed to be doing and making the most of this art space we've been given.
Yeah. Thank you for creating the space for me to be here.
No, thank you. I appreciate it.